This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch or get 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, then please consider becoming a patron and joining us at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cult Popture podcast. My name is AJ, and I'm joined as usual by Richard.
Hello.
And this is, of course, film franchise Fortnights, but we're doing something a little different.
A little bit silly.
A little bit unnecessary.
A little bit misguided.
To celebrate what I've just realised, or just been reminded of as soon as I've started talking about, is our 3rd birthday, the podcast's 3rd anniversary. We thought it would be pretty cool to go back and redo a franchise from our first year of the show, and we put it to our patrons. We said, hey, which one would you like us to redo? And they picked what I've come to realise was not the worst franchise, but certainly the most confusing one to try and figure out how to redo. So welcome everybody to what is the first and maybe the last film franchise Fortnights, Redux.
Yeah. So we hadn't discussed a theme song beforehand.
I sent you it in the email.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was actually, we just did it perfectly. That was exactly what we planned.
Exactly. So, of course, if you haven't read the title of the episode, if you just see that Cult Popture has uploaded a podcast and you close your eyes and click play on the episode before you read what it is, the winner of the poll and the franchise we are redoing for you today is the Spider-Man franchise. So the reason this was such a difficult one to kind of try and figure out is because, Richard, what was the point of redoing a franchise? You know, like regardless of what we ended
it was
up
like, you know, we weren't great when we first started, but now we are. And yeah, we thought there's some franchises there that maybe we covered too early. Like, you know, Back to the Future, we were so worried about a time limit, and so we split it up over 3 episodes, even though it's shorter than a lot of our episodes are nowadays. Or something like when we listened back to Medea, when we did that for film franchise follow-ups, because they released Boo 2, a Medea Halloween, we realized we didn't even talk about the first one, really, because we talked about it in such a chaotic way that a lot of the films didn't even get coverage. So we wanted to revisit one of those earlier franchises and really give it the love or the hate that it deserves.
Yeah, we're a lot more refined now, and we thought maybe some of those early franchises deserved a second go around. And what, like, the problem with doing Spider-Man is that because 3 movies have come out since we discussed it, it's this kind of isn't really a redo. It's more of an update.
Yeah, and it's
a different beast.
It's not just 3 new movies; it's 3 new canons of come out.
Exactly. 3 new continuities exist now, and they're existing concurrently with each other. Which I can't think of another franchise where that's happened. There are 4 canons if you count the PS4 video game, Spider-Man game,
and there's like a TV series.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. But at least like mainstream continuities, I can't think of another intellectual property where there are more than 2 at the most going at the same time.
Yeah.
So this is Spider-Man, I guess. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the films. We're going to talk about them. We're going to probably split them up into their continuities and talk about those continuities as a whole. And you may be like, oh, but there's 8 movies. And it's like, yeah, but there's 2 continuities for the first lot, and then the last 3 have their own continuity. So it basically is their own discussion per film. And so, yeah, the films we're going to be talking about are Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Rise of Electro, Spider-Man Homecoming, Venom, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So, Richard, without further ado, let's get right into it, bro. So,
strap me in.
The first movie we're going to be talking about is Spider-Man, which was released in 2002. It was directed by Sam Raimi. Richard, do you remember what Spider-Man 2002 has on Rotten Tomatoes?
92.
90, very close. And what is this film about? Give us the briefest rundown you can.
Okay, so Spider-Man, you know how Spider-Man became Spider-Man. Peter Parker's just your average 30-year-old high school student who wants to get the girl but can't because he's such a nerd. And then he gets bitten by a radioactive spider, which gives him spider powers, so he can shoot webs out of his wrists and he can climb up walls. And he then fights the Green Goblin, who is his best friend Harry's dad, Norman Osborn.
Yes, correct. This is our third, but technically first, but it is now our fourth if you count it twice, franchise to feature Oscar winner or future Oscar winner Octavia Spencer in a very small and somewhat undignified role after Legally Blonde and Bad Santa.
Yeah.
In Legally Blonde, she has one line as like a security guard, and in Bad Santa, she's a sex worker who specializes in anal. And in Spider-Man, she is the like person you go to register with when you go do the wrestling that Peter does when he first becomes Spider-Man.
Oh, it's also our second, technically first, film franchise in which a character like plays an evil and good version of themselves that's like, in like a schizophrenic kind of way and talks to themselves being like, let's do this. No, we can't. In a 2002 film. Because of course in Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, there's that famous scene with Gollum and Smeagol.
Awesome. So, Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004. That was also directed by Sam Raimi. What do you think that has on Roddy Tomatoes?
That would be like 92, 93.
93, yep. And what is Spider-Man 2 about?
So Spider-Man 2 is all about Peter Parker trying to balance his Peter life with his Spider-Man life. And meanwhile, the villainous Doc Ock is there and sort of coming in the background. He was once a kind of mentor to Peter, but now he's got 4 tentacles made out of metal, and eventually Peter kind of retires Spider-Man, but then realizes that like he's big, he's more important. So yeah, it's very beautiful.
These movies are so easy to describe. That's the great thing about early superhero movies. It's like, what are they about? It's about this hero and this villain and this small personal conflict,
Yeah.
So that was the trilogy of the Raimi Spider-Man continuity was rounded off by Spider-Man 3 in 2007, also directed by Sam Raimi. What do you think that has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm pretty sure it's just above fresh, so it's like 60, low 60s.
63, correct. Yeah. What is Spider-Man 3 about?
So now Peter Parker's, he's super ego kind of thing. So he's really up himself about both things going well in his Spider-Man life and in his Peter Parker life. And so he's kind of too hot to trot. And then his relationship with MJ ends up deteriorating. And then we've got 3 villains this time. So Harry Osborn, who I mentioned before, is now kind of carrying on, finishing what his father started and becomes the new Goblin. Mm-hmm. And then there's also Sandman, who is revealed to be the person that actually killed Uncle Ben, but it was by accident. And then also Venom comes onto the scene, who originally gives Peter a black suit, which kind of emphasizes all of his negative traits, like his ego and all this, and then eventually he realizes what it's doing to him, and then the symbiote, it's called, which is the Venom thing, then drips onto Eddie Brock, who is Peter's work rival, who now is souped up and wants to kill Spider-Man / Peter Parker
/ Mary Jane.
So he just wants
get
to
revenge on him because he kind of wrecked his career. Sweet. So then we took a sharp left turn and did a reboot in 2012 with The Amazing Spider-Man, directed by Mark Webb. What do you think that has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I think 75.
72. And what is The Amazing Spider-Man about?
So it's the same kind of origin story, except now he's like a cool skateboarder that no one wants to hang out with. And this time his teacher, Dr. Kirk Connors, no, it's not his teacher actually, he used to work with his father. Dr. Kirk Connors becomes the Lizard in an attempt to grow back an arm, and then they fight, and Gwen Stacy is the love interest in this one. And it sort of teases a lot more of Peter's parents, which was kind of the hook of the reboot.
Mm-hmm. And that reboot was swiftly decapitated after the next film, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, sometimes called The Amazing Spider-Man 2 Rise of Electro, in 2014. Also directed by Mark Webb. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's like 50...
52. A lot of 2s and 3s in these ratings. Yeah, 52 on Rotten Tomatoes. And what's this one about?
So this one, you've got Peter Parker's now, again, Spider-Man's doing quite well, whatnot. But now you've got Max Dillon, played by Jamie Foxx. I haven't mentioned anyone else's real name or like who they're played by. Who turns into Electro, so Spider-Man has to fight him. But then there's also a Harry Osborn's in it again, and he eventually becomes, he's got this sickness and needs Spider-Man's blood for a cure, and he turns into a kind of version of the Green Goblin. And also the movie is bookended by fights with the Rhino, and it's teased that they would become the Sinister Six at some point.
That you could sum up this movie by the phrase, and also there is.
Yeah.
You know, there is so much in that movie. So yeah, that didn't do too well critically, so they... we'll get more into this later, but the rights for Spider-Man were like kind of not offered back to Marvel Studios, but they struck a deal that allowed for Spider-Man Homecoming, the third reboot in 10 years. I guess not third reboot, but third continuity in 10 years. Spider-Man Homecoming in 2017, directed by John Watts. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
This is like 97 or something. It's quite
92.
High. Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
It's the same as just below Spider-Man 2. And what's Spider-Man Homecoming about? Well, this is first of all, we already did this one. We did this one a month ago on the MCU episode, and we rewatched it for you guys, and this is the fastest we've ever rewatched a film. The only time, actually, I think we've rewatched a film, because Spider-Man as a franchise is the franchise that will break the tenuous format of this podcast. Homecoming is evidence of that.
So Homecoming is we meet a Spider-Man complete with pre-murdered Uncle Ben and pre-bitten spider hand. And so this is following on from the events of Civil War in the MCU, where we're introduced to this character, but now he's kind of, the whole sort of arc of it is, am I worthy of being Spider-Man? And he has Iron Man there to sort of mentor him, but he's taking on the villainous Vulture, who is using weapons from the Chitauri invasion of New York to wreak havoc. He's sort of an arms dealer, and he wants to steal all of the Avengers stuff.
Very, very good. And then in 2018, we had Venom, directed by Ruben Fleischer. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It was like 30, wasn't it?
29.
Yeah.
Dipped below 30.
It's dipped since I last looked.
What is Venom about?
Oh, so Eddie...
Can you tell me?
Eddie Block is a reporter, and he is investigating the Life Foundation, who is like... who's testing symbiotes, who's doing experiments on symbiotes, and then through his journalism, he ends up getting infected with a parasite, he keeps calling it, the symbiote, which we know as Venom, and then they sort of learn to work together to take on I've forgotten the character's name, Riz Ahmed's character. Right, yeah, Riz Ahmed's character, Riot. I can't remember his actual character's name, but yeah, Riot, who is another. Is a slightly grayer version of it, and they fight, and
great. So then later that year, 2018, we got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This was directed by Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman. What has this got on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's like 98, isn't it?
97. So like, whoa. What a yo-yoing franchise this is. Let's recap.
But also with Spider-Verse as well, aside from the directors as well, the kind of most important creative voices behind it are Lord and Miller as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got 90%, 93%, 63%, 72%, 52%, 92%, 29%, 97%. So the lowest and highest right next to each other. What is Into the Spider-Verse about?
So it takes place kind of in the Ultimate universe. If you're familiar with the comics, it's like more of the like Ultimate Spider-Man sort of stuff, where there's a slightly alternate version of the 616 reality, which is what we technically live in. But we meet Miles Morales, who's just he's a half Hispanic, half black, half African American. I was correcting myself. He's not three halves. And he, young kid who lives in Queens, and he looks up to Spider-Man. He then sees Spider-Man get murdered, and he's bitten by a radioactive spider himself, and he gets the Spider-Man powers. But at that same time, Wilson Fisk is testing a like dimensional portal kind of thing to get his family back, and it ends up spitting a few different versions of Spider-Man into his reality. So we have the kind of Earth 616 Peter Parker, who is like an older definitely past his heyday Peter Parker. You get Spider-Man Noir, you get Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen, and you get Penny Parker, and you also get Spider-Ham, and then they all have to team up and learn to work together, and Miles also has to learn to become Spider-Man, and then they put the thing in the thing, and everything's hunky-dory.
And it's animated. I don't think
it's animated, yeah. It's beautifully animated.
Yeah. So which film is your favorite? How would you rank them?
Ooh, okay. Ranking all of them. Okay, so Into the Spider-Verse goes number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd probably go Raimi 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then Raimi 2, then Homecoming, then Raimi 3, and then Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then Amazing Spider-Man 1, Venom.
Wow. So, I listened
Actually,
back...
no, I'm going to go Venom, Amazing Spider-Man 1.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I listened back to some of our original Spider-Man episode.
Yeah, and I didn't listen back to any of it as well.
I want to say as well that we're not going to be repeating everything we said in that episode. So there'll be maybe bits of trivia or behind the scenes stuff that I haven't. Just go listen to the old one if you want a comprehensive Cult Popture Does Spider-Man episode, I guess. But our ranking was mostly the same, and that I believe was Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, The Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man 3. You've changed up a bit. Mine is a little bit different. So my favorite is still Spider-Man 2, and this is followed very closely by Into the Spider-Verse. Then I'd go OG Spider-Man from 2002, then Homecoming, then The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 are kind of even for me, then Venom, then Spider-Man 3.
Interesting. Yeah, I Spider-Man 1 and 2, the Raimi ones, are pretty interchangeable for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the Raimi trilogy, man, it's just so good. It is so it's the closest until Into the Spider-Verse, it's the closest we've come to an actual comic book being adequately shown, or even adequately, I should say, because it's above it adequate, shown on screen. It's so bright and bubbly and funny and dramatic. And yeah, I think the reason why I think they're held in such high regard, especially comparing them to modern superhero movies, is they seem to embrace campiness in a very accessible way that other superhero movies have failed to do, such as like Batman and Robin, and other superhero movies haven't even tried to do, such as some movies in this very series.
Yeah, The Dark Knight didn't try and embrace the campiness.
No.
Look how much that sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's something as well, like... I think these movies really nailed like the awe of a man becoming Spider-Man.
Hell yeah.
Not only just like of what it must be like from their perspective, but also seeing someone like that swing through the streets. It's like, hell yeah, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So that original Spider-Man film, you'll probably know more about this than me, Richard, and I'm sure people listening to this podcast probably have some peripheral knowledge, but that original film was in production hell for nearly 25 years. A lot of creators moved in and out of the writer and director chair, including James Cameron, Roland Emmerich, Ang Lee, Chris Columbus, Jan de Bont, M. Night Shyamalan, Tony Scott, and David Fincher. They're all, at some point considered before Sam Raimi was brought on. David Fincher's version, he wanted to make a movie about the night Gwen Stacy died instead of an origin story. And James Cameron apparently wanted to make the worst movie ever.
I think we talked about that in our original one, didn't we?
I think so.
Yeah, it was going to star Leonardo DiCaprio. And he was going to tie MJ spread eagle on top of the Brooklyn Bridge and have sex with her.
Yeah, among other strange things.
I think those were the two. Those are the only two things in the movie, weren't they?
No, I've heard somewhere that like Doc Ock was going to be the main villain, but Doc Ock was going to insist that he was called Spider-Man and stuff that. It's like weird stuff like that. Yeah. So the other big piece of behind the scenes stuff that everyone who's ever done a podcast on the Spider-Man movies wants to talk about is 9/11. I don't know. We've talked about it.
Yeah, we haven't talked about 9/11 in a while. We used to talk about it all the time.
So the original Spider-Man movie, a lot of its marketing involved the Twin Towers. There was a poster and a trailer that incorporated the Twin Towers, and they were swiftly changed.
And it was also originally slated for 2001 release, wasn't it?
Was it?
The movie, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
And also, the movie is kind of... We'll move past this because I feel like people talk about it all the time. The movie is kind of like a light in the darkness in a post-9/11 world. I
remember talking about this because it's very pro-New York in a time when people were kind of afraid to be pro-New York.
Yeah, exactly. I think... So the first film in the series, I think, is pretty flawless. There are a few things I don't think... were great. I think Green Goblin's suit is pretty dumb. He looks like a Power Ranger
Yeah, but you compare it with
villain.
how he looks in the comics. It's like...
Yeah.
He does look like a Power Rangers character, though.
Not that that's a particularly hot take. A lot of people sort of criticize the film for that. And the other thing I noticed when watching this was a lot of the characters who have or should have known each other for years kind of interact like they've just met. Like when Peter talks to MJ, when he takes the photo of her at the lab when she's posing next to the spider, he talks to her like she's just the girl in his class who he has a crush on and not like his next door neighbor since he was a little kid.
But it is also kind of like implied that the events of the film make them closer and they hadn't really talked that much. Because he does does she even know I exist?
Yeah, maybe. Okay. I noticed similar things with Harry and MJ as well as Norman Osborn and Peter. Like, they meet in the movie, and Harry's been Peter's friend his whole life, and he's never met his dad.
I think that is kind of a reoccurring thing in canon a little bit, though, that, Harry, and across all sort of versions of Spider-Man, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, fans, but I think it is, there's a lot of Harry and Peter growing up together because neither of them really had parents because Peter's obviously died and then I think Harry's mum's dead and Norman's always working.
Right. Okay. Well, other than that, I think the movie's pretty awesome, pretty top notch, a pretty repeatable formula for a great superhero movie.
Oh yeah,
well.
This wrote the book on origin stories, it's it's one of those things. Even though we've seen origin stories over and over and over again, it's still so great to go back and watch the first one that did it right.
Yeah,
you there's so many things like that you're sick of them now. Even watching watching Arrested Development and seeing Michael Cera's shtick for the first time when it was with the thing that invented it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is a thing that invented it kind of movie. Moving on to the second film, if you don't mind, Richard.
I don't mind.
We talked about this last week on the What's the Best Sequel. We crowned it the best sequel, sort of.
Well, tied, yeah.
Yeah. It's such a fantastic sequel, and it's such an excellent film in its own right as well. I love so many of the scenes in this. I mean, in the first two movies, the upside down kiss from the first one is fucking iconic, man. That's an iconic piece of film, and as well as that, the the train scene when he stops the moving train in Spider-Man 2 is like...
Which is way later. It's always way later in the film than I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
I always think of that as like the midpoint of the film, but it's like over 90 minutes into the film.
Right. I got to say, though, my favourite scene in Spider-Man 2, and feel free to tell me what yours is after this.
Oh, Jesus, I'll have to think of one.
My favourite is Aunt May's "I believe there's a hero in all of us" monologue. Gives me chills every time. It's such an amazing little monologue. It's such an amazing performance by Rosemary Harris, I believe her name is. Like, I watched Spider-Man 2 with friend of the show, Josh Monson, and he sort of came around. He's like, I haven't seen it in ages, and everyone always talks about how it's like so instrumental and good, but I've never seen it as an adult, basically. And that scene came up, and I was like, oh, this scene's so good. And she does the little monologue, and then I was like, oh, this is so good. And Josh was like, oh my God, like that was amazing. It's such a wonderful scene. I reckon it, because I feel like I believe there's a hero in all of us was somewhat this movie's with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, is that like the fact that Amazing Spider-Man, the Spider-Man still came out at a time when you can say with great power comes great responsibility, and have it repeated and be the motif of these three movies. And it's not be cheesy. Like, you know, if a Marvel movie tried to do that now, you would have to have someone immediately undercut it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're afraid of getting too serious. And they work around it a little bit in the later films, because they all kind of try to have their with great power.
We'll get to that, don't you worry.
But we'll get to them, I'm sure. But yeah, so they're allowed to have these like slightly cheesy, sincere moments, and because they're treating them with respect, they work really well.
Well, because the Raimi movies are cheesy, and that's how they get away with it.
Yeah, and like Raimi is like the perfect director to make these as well. It's like his kinetic, fun kind of energy. It's great. And it's that like similar to Lord of the Rings. It's that director coming from B movie sort of roots, and then making a big blockbuster. There's all these like fun, weird B movie quirks in them. Yeah,
no, totally. Yeah, man, it's so good. So this is a piece of trivia we brought up. I don't know why. Maybe we don't need to talk about this. While filming Seabiscuit in late 2002, Tobey Maguire suffered injuries to his back, and Sony was faced with the possibility of recasting their lead for Spider-Man 2. Negotiations arose to replace Maguire with Jake Gyllenhaal, though Maguire eventually recovered and was able to reprise his role with a salary of $17 million. Thanks, Wikipedia. I guess this is more significant now that Jake Gyllenhaal is going to be in an upcoming Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, it's also... yeah, that is. You're right.
How significant, they said. How significant, and then they moved on to the next door talking point. just dropping things that are significant.
No, it is. It's also, I was going to say, it's interesting that that would have decrowned it as being the best sequel, because it would have had a lead recast.
Speaking of our podcast from last week, What's the Best Sequel? The best thing, I think we did discuss this last week, and you sort of worded it in a really nice way that I hadn't thought of before.
I'm good at insightful pop culture commentary like that.
I agree. So as we discussed last week, the excellent character arc of Peter figuring out how to balance his two lives is such a good fucking choice for a sequel, man. It's so organic. It's such a natural place to take the story. And you last week you said... I've sort of paraphrased what you said. What I've written here is it's a wonderful build upon the great power, great responsibility theme, and working out how to handle those two things while still living a fulfilling life. Because you sort of said, like, how does he be Spider-Man but also have time for himself, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
And that is such a great way and relatable and like deeply human place to take the sequel, and I think that's why it works so well.
Yeah. It's the I am Spider-Man. Am I Spider-Man?
Exactly.
Thing.
Yeah.
It's good. Good stuff. Raimi.
But however, this excellent character arc, Richard, it wasn't always going to be what the movie was going to be about.
What?
So early drafts of Spider-Man 2 featured more villains, including Lizard and Black Cat, and one draft had a young Doc Ock also fall in love with MJ. So like they de-aged him for this continuity. Another draft revealed that Doc Ock was the creator of the spider which bit Peter. All these sound much worse than.
Yeah, and the ideas that, and Spider-Man 3 has some ideas that, like, if they'd been cut, you would have been like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, they kind of accidentally fell into the genius of only doing one villain for the second film as well, you know, instead of, because they tried to put more in, but then just ended up with one. And it's like, you know, one of the big criticisms of Spider-Man 3 is that there's too many villains.
Yeah.
Because Spider-Man 3 is indeed the black sheep of the family, I'm not sure if the pun is intended. You can you can infer the pun if you'd like. So it's a pun because he has a black suit. Just in case that wasn't clear.
No, sorry. Jess just put on a real loud video in the other room, and I thought that like someone had walked into our house, and so I was like, "What the?" So I didn't actually hear what you said.
I said Spider-Man 3 is the black sheep of the family.
That is a good pun because he has a black suit.
Yeah. And Raimi himself has stated he wasn't happy with how it turned out. This is quite a difficult movie to judge because in terms of how it stacks up against the previous two, there's a noticeable dip in quality, but also its like place in the annals of meme culture is so significant that a lot of people like have a soft spot for it now. Like,
I have a soft spot for it. I've always had a soft spot for it.
I've got friends who have collected, and they'll love that I'm giving them a shout out. They collect Spider-Man 3 DVDs. So they've got like 25 Spider-Man 3 DVDs just on their shelf in their lounge.
That's great.
And it's like a tradition now to go to secondhand DVD stores and like see if they have a copy of Spider-Man 3 and buy it.
That's amazing. I've always had a soft spot for Spider-Man 3. But because this is, I remember real distinctly this being like a movie that I was excited for. Yeah. Because I remember you going on like Apple trailers and like downloading the trailer for Spider-Man 3 and the Simpsons movie, and like watching those over and over again, and like looking up shit about it, and like that's the first time I remember having that kind of like pre-release excitement and eagerness for research. And then I think watching it, I was like, yeah, this definitely isn't as good. But I still had a soft spot for it. And I describe it as being like Spider-Man 3 is the good kind of bad movie. It's the bad movie that you can still enjoy. Whereas like something like The Amazing Spider-Man, I would say is the bad kind of bad movie. And The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has elements of both as well. Like the good kind of bad and the bad kind of bad.
I agree with you. However, doing this podcast for exactly 3 years has made me really like cherish when I get to see a real good movie. Yeah. And it's made me really angry when I have to watch a real bad movie. And even though I agree that this is more maybe fun than the Amazing Spider-Man series, I loathe Spider-Man 3.
I love Spider-Man 3, dude.
I hate it. I hate it because
I love it.
I hate it because of the streak it breaks.
Right, yeah. Like we could have had the perfect trilogy.
We could have had a perfect trilogy, and I hate that it broke that. Even if like people have defended this movie to me before. They've said, "Oh, all the cheesy stuff is supposed to be intentional." Cool. I think those were bad choices, though.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, like the emo Peter Parker dancing stuff is like. It's supposed to be cringy, yeah. I get your side of the argument. I get the other side of the argument, but yeah, like I don't know. There's something about Spider-Man 3 that's like I don't know, and partly because I'm nostalgic for it as well. But talking about like we almost had the perfect trilogy in a sense. The third one being shit is like a perfect trilogy in a way. Like
it's a traditional trilogy.
Yeah, it's like when you talk about trilogies, it's like, oh, the first one's amazing, second one was real good, and the third one's shit. Like that's like when you look at trilogy in the dictionary, it says that.
Yes, but I just would have rather we got an amazing third film. And I
Instead,
think
we got an amazing fourth film.
I think MJ is horrible in this movie.
Yeah,
like she's
With
so
her, how her and James Franco have both developed a lazy eye only in this movie.
I didn't notice that. That's not what I meant by. I wasn't judging her appearance as being horrible. I'm more
I also mentioned a man's appearance, so it's not sexist.
I'm not saying it's sexist. I'm saying that it's not what I meant. I more meant that, like, her decision making, the way she's written, is just makes her out to be a shitty character. Yeah, and as you said, emo Peter Parker, like Tobey Maguire is such a squishy looking dude that it's just doing it. Like even in Spider-Man 2, when he's like pulling the train and he's got like his like face smushes into itself, it's like it works because Peter, like this is a very realistic portrayal of a genuine geek becoming someone like Spider-Man. Yeah. But it's just so out of touch in Spider-Man 3. It's 2007. It's right on the heat death of emodom. Like, and it is.
I was still emo for a couple of years after that.
Well, we live in New Zealand.
Well, you're not cool, Richard.
I almost think Spider-Man 3 is as bad as the first two are good. Like, it's like a kick in the nuts, this movie.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I do not feel that passionately about it. I mean, it's objectively bad, and there's stuff I like laughing at when I watch it. But there are still some great stuff in it. Like the creation of Sandman is fantastic. That's such a great scene. And
did you like the creation of Sandman being the real killer of Uncle Ben?
Well, again, that's like if that was cut from the movie, you'd be like, it's such a like, oh, do you know they were originally going to make like, you know, it's so like that.
retcon so that Sandman killed Uncle Ben. I'm glad they didn't put that in the movie. Just kidding, they did.
Yeah, but I mean, whatever. It's like it gives a good like arc for Peter and. You know, but also the one of the main things that's complained about this movie is the casting of Topher Grace as Eddie Brock. I love it. I love Topher Grace as Eddie Brock. I think it's a great like you know, Jesus. Sorry, I've been drinking a Diet Coke with ginger and lime, and it's starting to hit me.
Does that mean you want me to keep that burp in the final?
Yeah, you have to now. Yeah. And this conversation about it.
Fantastic.
So yeah, they could have just gone full blast with it and just cast Jake Gyllenhaal as it, like have these like two identical people because it's supposed to be the mirror image of him. But yeah, I think it's great, and because everyone's like, no, Eddie Brock's supposed to be this hulking mess, and it's like. They're doing something different with the character. It's fine. And now every time they do something different with the character, they're like, oh wow, like what a great twist.
Spider-Man invented a lot of stuff like subversions and tropes of that kind of stuff. Well, so speaking of Peter's arc and what you sort of mentioned that before, this is what Sam Raimi wanted to do with Peter in the third film. He said that Spider-Man 3 was to be Peter learning that he is not a sinless vigilante, and that there can also be humanity in those he considers criminals. That's definitely in there. I don't love that as a continuation from his arc from the first two.
Yeah, it feels like that should be earlier on, because when he has when Uncle Ben's, who he thinks is Uncle Ben's killer, lets him fall to his death, that's kind of we don't actually see it, like see him come to this realization, but it seems like that's the kind of inception of his Spider-Man doesn't kill kind of rule.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of talk before. I think we talked about this in the last episode about Raimi being forced to use Venom as a villain and sort of stuff like that, and that's one of the reasons this movie didn't do as well critically. But it doesn't really sound like he had anything good to work with outside of, like when researching what Spider-Man 3 was nearly about, I've never been like, oh, I wish that's what it was about. Like, I've never been like, oh, wow, that's a cool thing. They should have done that instead.
Well, if it was just Harry and Sandman, like, I think that's quite cool, because I love the idea that we've had 3 movies be an origin story for Harry becoming a villain, and then you also just have just chuck Sandman in there as well.
Sandman has got such a small role if you look at this film on a macro level, though.
Yeah, he disappears for like 40 minutes at one point.
Yeah, he barely has an arc. It's real strange.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Agree to somewhat disagree, but also kind of agree, but then also to say we agree feels disingenuous, so disagree, I guess.
Yep, that's a good summary of how we feel.
I've got some questions about the Raimi trilogy as a whole.
Do you want me to answer?
Yep.
All right, lay them on me, bud.
How the hell does Peter Parker make the suit? This is like a $1,000 textile project.
He's just real good at textiles.
Like, the best thing that Homecoming does is answer that question for me, because we get 2 continuities in a row where, like, this guy who's real good at science is, on the down low, he's, like, amazing at textiles. Like,
Yeah.
he can make a real good suit. The other question I have regarding his suit is, what's the deal with his feet? Does his little spider hairs on his fingers, are they on his toes and they, like, peek through the rubber soles of his shoes? Because he can climb with his feet as well. And I know this is a different continuity, but in Into the Spider-Verse, you actually see Miles just sit on a wall, meaning that he's connected to the wall through his feet.
Yeah.
Or his butt.
Well, you see them walk just with their feet a few times. Yeah, there is a canon explanation for it in the comics, but I can't remember what it is. It is something just like... Because the hairs are original to Raimi, like that weird creepy shot of the hairs coming out. It's more like...
I can feel it. There's a shot in the first film where he looks at his finger and you can see little, like, tiny little hairs poking out of his finger. And all I can think of whenever I see that shot is just like what it would feel to, like, rub your finger against something coarse and how to be like, ugh.
Yeah, so the wall crawl, here's the official explanation. His wall crawling ability is him increasing the molecular attraction between his body and the surface he's touching. So it works through thin layers of material, but not something as thick as shoes. His costume has padding on the feet, similar to ballerina slippers, but not actual shoes.
Interesting. Well, Miles Morales has full-on Nikes.
Yeah.
So. All right, okay. Here's the big one, and I know we talked about this on the last episode, but as in the one from 3 years ago. But in that 3 years, I've become way more passionate about this subject. All right, Richard, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Organic web shooters make so much more sense to me than the mechanical bionic web shooters.
Yeah,
and I'm so surprised to see that the general preference is for bionic just because it's canon.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the original way. But yeah, and it's interesting because Raimi, I believe, said that the reason it's organic is because it would suspend too much disbelief.
Yeah, to believe that I read the quote, it was like, it's too much to believe that a high school student from New York in his spare time can create a wonder adhesive. You know? And on top of that, you're telling me that the radioactive spider just happened to bite the kid who was capable of making that adhesive?
No, so he's already like a super genius, and the spider bite increases that. So then, because of that, he was like, I should become Spider-Man. I should have these. So he invents them because of that. Spider-Man canon is like one of the smartest characters.
Okay. Well,
so
fair enough.
It's no more unbelievable than Tony Stark creating an Iron Man suit.
Sure. But, okay, moving on then to another thing that I want to talk about with the organic versus bionic web shooters. I get that the spider gives Peter other powers. I get that he gets spidey sense, he's super strong, and he can walk on walls. But I don't think any of them are quite as iconic as web slinging. And it seems so silly to me that this means that theoretically someone else could make the web formula and steal like 75% of the whole allure of Spider-Man's powers.
Yeah, all the other powers seem so like ancillary to the thing. But also, like, if he was supposed to get the powers, if he got the organic web shooters, like, why do they come out of his wrists? And
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's literally, you did my segue for me. And one of the things we like to do on the show is point out when someone does a segue as to ruin the segue, including this. Yeah, so that the people are always like, oh, it should come out as butt, because that's where a spider shoots. Well, I don't think a spider literally shoots out the butt, but it shoots out the back end.
The thorax.
I disagree with this, because for a spider's biological makeup, it makes sense for the web to come out that side. But I think because human hands are so intrinsically linked to how we as a species have evolved, we used tools, and that's why we became Homo sapiens. We would shoot web out our hands if we had a spider's ability. It's the human equivalent to a spider shooting it out its butt.
Yeah. I think I talked about this a little bit on the last podcast, but about how the comics gave him organic web shooters after the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that he gets bitten by another spider or something like that, and then he turns into a spider. So he slowly turns into this giant spider, and then that spider cracks open, and a clone of Peter comes out, who's the exact same, but now he has organic web shooters.
Wow. Why didn't they put that in the movies?
Yeah, or the plot line where Mary Jane gets cancer because of Peter's radioactive semen.
Yeah, let's see the realistic Chernobyl style version of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we move on to Amazing Spider-Man?
Well, I'd like to talk more about Peter's semen.
There's another cool thing actually about the Raimi films is that the first one is a teenage boy starts squirting strange white sticky liquid everywhere, and then the second one is that when he's a little bit older, that teenage boy can't manage to squirt that liquid anymore.
Yeah, no, that's good.
All right, so let's move on to The Amazing Spider-Man. And Richard, y'all mind if I be real harsh on The Amazing Spider-Man?
Oh, go for it. I fucking hate The Amazing Spider-Man.
Every
time I watch it, I like it less.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel as well. We were quite kind to it in the original Spider-Man episode. The entire conversation in my episode plan here is just bullet points of things I don't like about the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I don't know. I remember you prefer the second one, which is quite the unpopular opinion. But I kind of agree.
Yeah.
So it's not unpopular within the two people talking right now.
Yeah, so suck it, audience.
Yeah, I don't think it's... I think as a series, I don't think the second one saves the series. You know what I mean?
No. If anything, it ruined the series.
So here are things I don't like about the TASM movies, the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Number one, they try to be dark and gritty, but then they also begin with the Lizard as the main villain, who is so cartoony and so silly and portrayed in such a they don't try to make it vaguely realistic.
I think they do, and that's part of the issue because
sure, maybe
he doesn't look like the Lizard from the comics or whatever. He looks like a Goomba from the Super Mario's movie.
Yeah, so I think
weird.
That was my first criticism when I first saw it. Was like, this is supposed to be so grounded, and you picked the most ridiculous villain we've seen in Spider-Man films so far.
Yeah.
I also think that we'll probably talk about this for a while. They construct this whole mysterious backstory about Peter's parents, and this storyline has gone down in history as one of the least cared about subplots in cinema, right?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? There's that whole scene in the second one where he goes to the train station and he finds the secret lab and learns more about his dad, and it's like, I don't care about any of this.
Well, because the story behind that is, the first one was advertised as being, the untold story.
Yeah.
And it was all going to be about his parents and all this stuff. And then they cut a lot of it out, and they were like, we're saving it for the second film. And then so we got all this shit in the second film, and they were like, and so because they put it in the second film, they had to cut out all the stuff where Shailene Woodley shot all these scenes as MJ in the second film. They were like, we're saving them for the third, and then the third never got made.
Yeah. And so moving on to the next thing I don't like about the TASM movies, the high school students are so fucking old. They're so clearly adults. And you can say the same thing about the Raimi films, but at least the high school setting is downplayed and they graduate halfway through the first film.
Yeah.
It's like they knew, so they were like, all right, let's do one big scene in the high school and then move them out, because obviously these are 35-year-old men playing Peter and Harry.
This is also our second franchise to have an abandoned Shailene Woodley performance.
True.
She never got to do the last Divergent movie.
Yeah. Yeah, Andrew Garfield excels at being a wisecracking Spider-Man. That's one of the nicest things I can say about this series.
Yeah.
But when he's at high school, he's doing this weird impression of a teenager who's trying to be cool or different. And he's not doing a good job of a teenager trying to be cool or different, but maybe teenagers who are trying to be cool or different don't do good jobs either. Let's role play. You be Gwen Stacy. I'll play Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker.
Hey there, Peter Parker. Have you got something for me?
Oh, have I got something for you? Yeah. I got something for you. I mean, no, that came out wrong. I mean, you can't. I didn't mean it like that. I mean, do you want to, we could go maybe later if you're, it's, there's a lot of, what?
Oh, the thing is, yeah.
That's what he plays it like. And I like Andrew Garfield. I feel like these movies kind of tanked his rising fame.
Yeah, but then I also think he's one of those guys that's happier doing indie projects.
Yeah.
So that's another bad thing. Keep us in bad things, and then we'll go through some good things.
Okay. Peter having his name on his camera is such a lazy way for Liz to find out who he is.
Oh my
Liz
God,
finds his
it's
camera
so
property of Peter
stupid.
Parker. That's something that was in the first draft of the script with a little note to it saying, obviously we'll change this later.
Yeah.
Like, at least maybe he looks at the photos on the camera. At least then it's more like absent-minded and he figures out it's Peter Parker as opposed to anything else. Lizard's motivation is at both times logical and insane. I don't think they do a good enough job of marrying the I want to cure the world motivation with the I have to destroy and kill everyone angle. You know, it doesn't justify, one doesn't justify the other. I've made a cult popcorn video about this, but the film tries to do the they can never be together doomed love story at the end of the first film, and then they wrap it up before it cuts to credits. The Raimi trilogy, like all of Spider-Man 2, is about Peter working out how he can be with the love
I
of his
watched
life.
the films again with that in mind, but all of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is about that as well.
That's true, but at least Spider-Man 1 ends on a Casablancan cliffhanger.
Yeah, but I guess it's like the Amazing Spider-Man 1 is like the end of Batman v Superman, where it's like, oh, it's over, but is it? And then they completely abandon that in the second film to have like another way of it being like, oh, it's coming back together.
Yeah. And similarly, in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, spoilers, Gwen Stacy dies at the end. And the time between Gwen dying and Peter stepping back up to be Spider-Man, that's got to be less than 10 minutes of screen time.
I think it's like 8.5 minutes or so.
It's a very rushed grieving period, and the happy ending feels very forced. Like, that movie should have ended with Peter giving up being Spider-Man.
Yeah, imagine if we got these two movies, they never made a third, and it just ends with him being real depressed and stopping being Spider-Man.
It'd feel more like an ending.
Yeah. Are you ready to talk about anything good?
We've got 3 more bad things, and then I've got things I like.
Cool.
Jamie Foxx, horribly miscast, gives a terrible performance as Max Dillon. There's a scene at the start where he's carrying blueprints, walking down New York, and he's like, "Excuse me, little help here," and it's like, who are you talking to? You're talking to just strangers, it's so weird. And I think the main problem is that Jamie Foxx is one of the coolest men alive, and he's trying to play a nerd, and it's a compliment to the actor, I guess, is that he's too cool to play this character.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, the amount of makeup and shit they have to put him in is just ridiculous. But like, I don't think James, because Max Dillon is, such a put upon kind of nerd, and then Electro is like supposed to be, quite cool and cool, calm, and collected kind of thing. And Jamie Foxx doesn't suit either of the interpretations of those characters kind of thing. So you need someone that's real comfortable in one and that works better in the other, Like if you cast like a complete nerd that, oh shit, he's like playing a cool dude now. Whereas like, I don't think Jamie Foxx, even though they were saying about how cool he is, he doesn't work. It's not the right kind of thing that for this Electro. Yeah. No, I don't really have a person in mind though. I was trying to think of one while I was watching it, and I was like, I actually just can't think of a better one. But I mean, like literally anybody.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is so jam-packed full of so much shit, and a lot of it isn't very interesting. Some of it is, but the Amazing Spider-Man 2 has got to be one of the most desperate films ever made. Like, it is true. It's like, oh, set up a universe, let's do it all in one movie.
Yeah.
It's almost like you can hear the creative like people behind it screeching as they're like putting everything into the quickly we don't have time, no time to explain, put in the origin story about his parents.
Well, do you know who they should have cast as Max Dillon? Who's like a black actor who's good at playing sort of like cool characters and also nerds. Is Jaleel White. Urkel himself.
That'd be great. And my last thing that I don't like about this series is that they put Gone, Gone, Gone by Philip Phillips in the second film. And I don't know what it is. It's just that was the most popular song at the time.
Yeah, there's a Cosmonaut Variety Hour says like he avoided that film, he never saw it for ages, and then he watched it and it's like his least favorite song of all time.
Yeah, I don't like the song, but also just it feels weird to put never put the biggest song of at that time in the movie. Do you know what I mean?
Unless you're trying to make a statement or whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's unsubtle.
Well, also like he's an American Idol winner, and like and like win long past American Idol's prime.
Yeah. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. No, he was season might have been 10 or 11, I think. But yeah, he yeah. It's very strange, very jarring. Can I list one thing that I don't like about the song, which will also segue into things we like. The suit in the first film is fucking ugly. It's the worst Spider-Man suit we've ever seen. It's them trying to do like a dark and gritty reboot of the suit, and it's like it's so stupid, and it's so like wannabe edgy and just awful. Whereas transitioning to things we like, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit might be the best on-screen suit we've seen.
Yeah,
live action.
it's really cute.
Yeah. Second suit's fantastic.
Yeah. Other things I like about it. Mark Webb, the director, is a master of directing cutesy scenes, I think.
Oh, yeah.
My favourite thing about the Amazing Spider-Man movies is Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone being lovey-dovey. And I know they were dating, and that definitely had to do with it.
But it's also that they like fell in love on the set, which makes it even better.
It's the love scenes in the Amazing Spider-Man movies are very cute.
Yeah, totally.
Second thing I like about the Amazing Spider-Man movies, Gwen dying at the end of the second film is so brutally tragic.
Oh, it's so
and
good.
It genuinely makes the film so much more interesting. It's almost more brutal than the series, like the benchmark it sets for where it's willing to go.
Yeah. But the way it hits is like so intense. But also like everyone knew it was coming because all the trailers had her in the night Gwen Stacy died outfit, and it would have been cool if she, they'd subverted it in some way or something like that. I think a lot of people maybe were expecting them to subvert it, but it's like it literally just ends with like a crack, then that's it, and you're like, oh shit.
It's such a undignified and lack of closure kind of death as well. And then they try and give it closure in 8 minutes.
Yeah, but because so in this, it's kind of she's falling, he shoots a web out, and it like is this little hand that reaches out to her, and it grabs her, and she stops with like right at ground level and smacks her head and kills her. In the comics, Green Goblin throws her off a bridge and he catches her, but the whiplash breaks her neck and that kills her. So that's a lot more like weighs on his conscience because it's like directly because of his actions that she's dead.
That's a lot more brutal.
Yeah. Whereas like this one, it's like, oh, she would have fallen to her death anyway.
Right.
Whereas, so I think maybe if she'd stopped just for, like if there was even if they could get in some way that's like, oh, she was about to be safe, but the web broke her neck.
That would be fucking
horrific for the sequel. Yeah, and then to have to deal with that in a sequel, like that's kind of why I'm in a sense I'm upset that there's not a third film. Like I'm glad we have Peter in the MCU. Like what was it, like a year after this one came out, but I would like to see where they would have gone with it.
Yeah, I do too. But Yeah, and I remember I've always thought I wish we only had 2 Raimi films, and I wish we had 3 Amazing Spider-Man films.
Well, they wanted like 6 fucking Raimi films.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that.
Oh, okay. Ooh, okay. Okay.
I really like the scenes in these movies where Peter or Spider-Man saves random people. The kid who's in the burning car in the first film, that was one of the scenes that you know how Sony released like an hour of footage before.
Yeah,
the
Spider-Man
movie?
2 had like, I think someone cut it together and there was like 40 minutes of footage.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd seen the Peter saves the kid in the car scene from the first film before I went to the movie, and it's probably my favourite scene in the movie, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and also in the second film when he walks the kid home.
That was what I was about to bring up. Yeah,
I knew you were, and I was like, I'm going to fucking get him before him.
Yeah, no, well, I'm glad you did. Why is it that the kid? Yeah, so kid's being bullied, and he's got the science project, and Spider-Man scares away the bullies, and then walks the kid home. That is the best scene in these movies. Why is that such a? It's such an incidental moment, but it somehow portrays exactly the kind of character you want Spider-Man to be.
Yeah, I mean, apart from like Spider-Verse and kind of the parts of the MCU one, that's Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man 2 probably has the best Spider-Man.
Yeah, one of the worst movies. Yeah, and so I really like that. The first-person perspective web slinging is what the first movie I remember was originally like sold on. It was the trailer for the first film, even though it's a reskinned Mirror's Edge trailer. It actually is. Like, watch them side by side. It's literally just Oh wow.
I think they bought the rights to it and just gave him spider hands.
Right. Well, I guess that was the like. You liked the Raimi movies. Well, what do you think it'd feel like to be Spider-Man? But then they didn't really go into it enough. It was basically that one sequence and then never again.
Yeah.
And my last point for The Amazing Spider-Man, what I like about it is I don't hate these movies. That's the nicest thing I could say, really is.
Yeah. Well, like, again, like the first one I would say is like the bad kind of bad where I get bored and it's just like, ugh. Whereas like the second one, it's like even the fact that it's like brighter is like more fun to watch.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cool stuff in it and a lot of, like, you're not quite there sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I quite like the idea of Electro being a nerd who like misses his birthday party but Spider-Man remembers him, and then the sort of what makes him evil, like he's doesn't control his powers and everyone's got these guns pointed at him, and then Spider-Man comes in to help him. He remembers him and he's like, oh my god, Spider-Man, we're best friends. But then all the attention turns on Spider-Man and he's like, wait a minute, I was just the center of attention and now Spider-Man is. And like I in a way I kind of like petty motivations. Like no, you can't have them all the time, but it's fun when it can be quite fun when a character's motivation is specific to one person, but for a real petty reason that just kind of escalates because now that you're antagonizing them, everything else is is in a different light.
Yeah.
But also Amazing Spider-Man 2. There's the whole subplot where we talked about before, where he goes to the subway and finds out about his dad, and like. That you could literally just lift that entire subplot out of the movie and the movie's improved and nothing will change.
Yeah.
There was a deleted scene where he goes to visit his dad's grave and then his dad shows up, and I presume that was going to come back in the third one. But the whole thing they did with, it's in the comics, I know, but like with Richard and Mary Parker, I think Mary, that like they
ruined the purity of Spider-Man just being a random kid.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a stupid decision. It's one of those like comic book things of like having to make every character like relevant, important or a superhero. Yeah. But yeah, whereas like Uncle Ben's were kind of one of the sacred ones that you like can't fuck with, because like Aunt May has like prequel comics and shit like that. And there was talk of an Aunt May prequel movie, which we'll get to later on, I'm sure. But yeah, the Richard and Barry Parker thing is silly.
So as you said before, one of the most interesting kind of pieces of trivia about the Amazing Spider-Man movies is that Shailene Woodley was in talks. Well, was more than just in talks to play this universe's version of MJ, and she did actually film a small collection of scenes for the second film, which was cut. According to Andrew Garfield, those scenes were in their backyards, and they had 2 or 3 scenes with them talking over the fence. And there was one there was going to be one of them riding on a motorcycle together that never got shot. Mark Webb explained her scenes were cut because he wanted to focus on Peter and Gwen and their relationship. That's a good idea, and adding any more future signposting into Amazing Spider-Man 2 would be a woefully poor
Yeah, because
decision.
there's so much, like, Felicity Jones is there as Black Cat, and
Yeah.
And then, like, the here's the next what we're planning,
Yeah.
when they, like, walk through and you see all the Sinister Six.
Yeah. All that being said, though, I think Shailene Woodley would have been a fantastic MJ.
Oh, totally.
Probably, maybe even the best one. But we'll never know.
Who knows?
We'll never see. All right, people, let's do this one last time. Richard, can you please explain why Spider-Man wasn't in the MCU and then how he ended up there for Spider-Man Homecoming?
So, in the 90s, Marvel was going bankrupt, so they sold off a bunch of the licensing rights to their comic book properties, and one of them was they sold Spider-Man to Sony. So, when Marvel decided to sort of become a film studio and make independent movies, they could only make the ones that they had the rights to left. So they didn't have Spider-Man, they didn't have Fantastic Four, they didn't have the X-Men. Those are kind of like the main ones that you'd expect them to be, but they're not there. And then eventually they managed to work out a deal where Spider-Man, but after the Amazing Spider-Man 2 bombing, that they could use Spider-Man in, like, team-up films, and Disney would get the money, and Sony could make solo Spider-Man movies with MCU characters appearing in them, and Sony would get all the money, but Marvel still kind of, like, has not, like, creative control, but oversees the project.
Yeah, cool. Great job. I think people won't get too mad if we somewhat race through the Homecoming conversation, considering we already kind of talked about it quite a lot. Definitely talked about it on the MCU episode. So the main thing, though, is we kind of, I don't know if you had this thought, but I was like, I need to watch Spider-Man Homecoming as a Spider-Man movie instead of an MCU movie.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it's more of an MCU movie than a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
But the grounded aesthetic of the MCU does mean that we get the first Spider-Man movie where all the characters actually look like high schoolers, and boy, is that a fresh breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and it's also like the idea of, like, it's on one hand, it's like a shame we never got to see this, like, accurate representation of high school when it's so much more like Flash Thompson's gonna beat me up kind of thing, and now we get, like, this is what nerds look like now, this is what bullies look like now. But it is, it's the trade-off is, like, it's better to have actual high school looking students. Yeah.
I also like that we see the web slinging and helping pedestrians from a different perspective. It's the opposite of the Amazing Spider-Man's first-person approach. Like, the shot that really struck me when I first saw Spider-Man Homecoming is during the that montage where it's like, what's the song that plays? That it plays in the credits as well. Beat Street Bop. That one.
Oh yeah, Blitzkrieg Bop.
Blitzkrieg Bop. It plays that, and you see him, like, from a a massive wide shot. You see him sling in it, but he doesn't aim he doesn't get the angle right, and he, like, just falls to the ground. And I remember seeing that shot in the theater and being like, I've never seen Spider-Man from this perspective before, from, like, this far away, looking like a small character. And it's funny that the MCU always makes their heroes so big and, like, the whole world is aware of them, because I kind of like the idea, at least at the beginning of Spider-Man Homecoming, of Spider-Man not being like known all around New York, more like something that maybe you heard someone talking about behind you at the supermarket aisle, like he's almost like an urban legend as opposed to a massive superhero at the start of the film.
Yeah he's like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
There you go. And look, I would be bummed that this feels like an MCU film instead of a Spider-Man film if this was the first Spider-Man film. If we'd never had one and it was like, there's going to be a new Spider-Man movie and it's, like, really MCU focused, I'd be like, that's lame. But we had the Raimi trilogy, and we saw what it looks like when you try reheat and regurgitate that in that order. You're reheating it in your stomach. That story with Amazing Spider-Man. But that did make me think, I wonder if people are bummed when like people who are like diehard fans of Black Panther or Doctor Strange then get their first movie and it's MCU entrenched. Although maybe I feel like Spider-Man is more MCU focused than a lot of the other solo movies because
imagine being bummed that you got Black Panther. Like, no, it's not what I wanted. It's like an Oscar winning, like one of the most successful comic book movies and one of the best of all time. And you're like,
yeah.
But whereas I think that's why something like Doctor Strange is an origin story, whereas Spider-Man: Homecoming cannot be.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Any more thoughts on Homecoming specifically?
I mean, I think I spoke about this on the MCU one, but I hope we see some like web slinging because it's like something I know that they're doing to differentiate themselves from the other ones, but we haven't really seen them like web sling.
Yeah, sure. Nice. All right, well then let's move on, Richard, to Venom. Venom. They ain't gonna know what hit him.
Yep, let's do it.
All right, this movie is woefully boring. Oh, man. I don't think Venom is 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'd probably give it a 40.
It's very strange movie.
Oh, it is so boring. You said to me when you started watching it, you were like, I was not expecting to watch this movie as recently after I saw it as I am. Like, we saw this movie
within the not 6 months.
Was it not
8,
6?
9?
It must have been 6.
No, I was going to say, it was like 8, 9 months ago.
9 months ago, damn. And like we did a State of Sony podcast where we talked about everything we needed to talk about with Venom. And that's another reason why I'm kind of like, why did people vote for Spider-Man as the franchise? I feel like we've covered Spider-Man quite comprehensively. The only thing I really like, well, I wouldn't even say I really like about this movie, the diamond in the rough, the like thing where you go, oh yeah, that kind of could have kind of been good maybe if they'd focused more on it. I like the Eddie/Venom dynamic. I really like the concept of someone of a certain type with a demonic alien living in their body who talks to them. I think all that's great. I think that's fun. I don't mind Tom Hardy's performance as Eddie Brock.
Oh, yeah, it's very strange, but it
kind of had to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He sounds like Elmer Fudd.
Yeah, but I kind of like that. At risk of sounding like I like bad things, I kind of like that he sounds weird. What else? Okay.
One thing that we should talk about is when this movie was announced and like the trailer came out and all the stuff, everyone's like, you can't do a Venom movie without Spider-Man. The fact that Spider-Man's not in this is not what's wrong with it at all.
No, but
not once did I feel the absence of Spider-Man.
No,
you know?
But I do think the whole what we see in Spider-Man 3, which I'm sure is from the comics of how Venom is created, is such a cool idea that it's a shame.
Right, he gets his shape and design.
He
off
looks
Spider-Man,
like Spider-Man because he used to be on the suit. That's basically
and because he normally in this movie his chest is just blank, but he in the comics and whatnot he has a spider on his chest. But yeah, I mean I didn't feel Spider-Man's absence or anything like that.
No. Let's rattle off the bad things about this movie.
One, and I'm going to say it because I know it's your favorite thing to say, but that Venom's character arc is introduced and resolved in one sentence.
It's so funny. It is. It's got to be one of the worst character arcs in film history. Well, not the arc itself. Like if you explained it to me in a sentence, isn't bad, but the way it's handled in the movie
it is explained to you in a sentence.
Exactly,
in the movie.
It's just laughable. So like he basically says, I came to Earth because I was going to destroy all humans, but I ended up liking you, Eddie, and now I want to save all humans. And he says that at the end of towards the start of the last act, and it's like, what the fuck? There's nothing about earlier in the movie that and Venom himself does not show up in this movie until very later in the game than I would have liked. And that's if you'd introduced him at the start, you could have had him be more of a monster and then slowly learns to love. Because I feel like the main plot of the movie happens within one night anyway.
Yeah.
he like jumps to the top of a building and he's like, it's quite beautiful from up here. And it's like, that's his character moment. That's his resolve. That's him changing his arc, which we haven't been told about yet, to be what it is.
Yeah. It's quite funny. But there's also the bit where Venom tells Eddie that he's like you on my home planet, I'm quite a loser. And it's like, I wish they'd leaned into that more, because there's the bit that from the trailer that everyone hated where he's like, I'm going to eat all your legs and arms, and then you'll just be this armless, legless thing rolling down the street like a turd in the wind. And then if when they left, Venom's like, was that threatening? And Eddie's like, nah, that was real lame. Like, because it's also the last scene in the movie. If the movie had ended with Eddie being like, that was real lame.
Yeah.
Like, it would have fixed the problem of the trailer, but also just like because everyone's like, oh, Venom's actually like makes lame jokes in the comics and it's fine. But yeah, like lean into the fact that this is a real lame person or parasite symbiote that is trying to act cool and failing.
Call me a Marvel shill, but it needed more undercutting. It needed more like undercutting serious moments with jokes, because the rest of the movie's so hard going that it's like, if you guys aren't going to tell me that it's bad, I'm going to tell you that it's bad. Like, imagine if when Venom was like, I actually was going to kill you guys, but now I quite like humans. Eddie's like, you're telling me this now? This is not growth, Venom. This is not character growth for you to delete. I had no idea. This means nothing to me. As far as I've known, you've just been this,
armless, legless thing.
And the other big thing that people always talk about when they talk about what's wrong with Venom is that the villain Riot is just a
big grey version
of Venom, and they fight in the night. That was a good decision.
I think it is also for budgetary reasons. But yeah, it's
Carlton Drake.
Yes,
that's Riz Ahmed's character's name. I forgot Riz Ahmed's name the other day, and I was like, "What's his name?" And I just couldn't remember.
Why is there good things about this movie? She-Venom's real sexy.
Oh, I actually like it's just a cool moment in the film that Venom gets passed back to Eddie when they make out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Michelle Williams is trash in this movie. Her performance, it's like just don't show up to set. If you're going to be this bad in the movie.
Yeah, agreed. It's just it's pretty bad. So we'll get to this more a bit later, but Venom. The reason we covered it on a Spider-Man episode is that the Venom movie that we got was more or less in production after Spider-Man 3. So it is in the Spider-Man.
Yeah. And also the other shitty thing about Venom is it's not even the best Venom movie of 2018.
Upgrade.
There was a movie called Upgrade that came out last year. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. It's literally just like a guy, Logan... Marshall Green, who looks like Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
And you'd be forgiven for thinking it is him.
I thought it was him when I first saw the trailer.
Yeah, he gets this, like, he gets paralyzed and he gets this chip in the back of his neck that can control his body, and so it has fight scenes where he's like beating all these dudes off, but his face is like, ugh. Exactly like in Venom, and it's such a cool movie as well. The camera work in it was awesome.
Yeah.
But Venom was just like such a mess. I am excited for a sequel though.
Are you excited for Sony's universe of Marvel characters?
The
Suckma nuts.
No, it's Sumka.
I know, but it's funnier. It's funnier to Sumka D's nuts.
Pretty sure that's the joke I made on the Sony podcast.
My favorite meme I saw the other day was, did you hear Tom Cruise got ligma? Who's Tom Cruise? Ligma balls. So when the first trailer for this one came out, and it was just like this weird, no hint of the character of Venom being in it. It's just Tom Hardy like going around like, my name is Eddie Block. I'm a reporter. And then there was like a couple of shots of him being like, oh, and then like shots of cars being like flipped away, which in the movie has like, the Venom tendrils attacking it, and the top comment on Reddit was like,
fans. You can't make a Venom movie without Spider-Man, and then Sony makes a movie with neither of them.
Well, hey, look, proving how diverse the Spider-Man IP can be, though, we have got one last Spider-Man film to talk about, Richard, and it came out in the same year as Venom, and as we said before, is the highest rated one on Rotten Tomatoes. We're, of course, talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So this film was first put on people's radar in the Sony email leak of 2014. It was revealed that Phil Lord and Chris Miller were working on it. So if you don't know those guys, they're kind of the captains of really fun meta comedies, such as
movies that sound like a bad idea, and then end up being amazing.
Yeah. So 21 Jump Street, Lego Movie,
Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Yeah, they nearly did Solo and then dropped out or got fired from Solo, and Solo went from being this sounds like a bad idea, except Chris Miller and Phil Lord are working on it too. This movie was a bad idea, and it sounds like, from what I looked into, it sounds like a lot of what's great and unique about this film comes from them, like the art style and the idea to focus on Miles Morales.
Because it was written by one of them, I think. Yeah.
I think this film is an excellent example of what difference a producer can make.
Yeah.
Because Spider-Man seems to be at its worst when it's just Sony producers figuring it out themselves, and it's at its best when someone like Sam Raimi or Kevin Feige or Lord and Miller step in. You know?
Yeah, not Avi Arad.
Or Catherine. There's a lady. What's her name?
Well, she threw a sandwich at at Feige.
Yeah, and she was talking about how Venom might be in the MCU, and Kevin Feige was like, "No."
I don't think so, Tim.
Yeah. Into the Spider-Verse continues. Like, having rewatched it, it's just
Amy Pascal.
I was thinking of Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah.
Who's the Star Wars lady who's pretty good at her job. Into the Spider-Verse, after rewatching it, I'm just like, man, this is just a candy shop of a movie.
It's such a good movie.
It's so good. There is so much to enjoy, and as it coming in at the end of our franchise, like the last Spider-Man movie we're going to be talking about, it is all the best elements of every other continuity. It has the comic book reality of Raimi. It has the quippy Peter Parker of The Amazing Spider-Man. It has the realistic characters of Spider-Man Homecoming. I don't know what Venom
what Venom has to offer.
And also, it's more, I wonder, I feel like that we could very easily get fatigued by this, but I wonder if every IP that's as tired and overdone as something like Spider-Man needs an Into the Spider-Verse. Like, we need a Batman movie where it's real meta and they make fun of what... And we can't... Actually, we did get that. We got the
Lego Batman
movie. Good point. I don't know, a Star Wars one then. Like a animated cinema release Star Wars movie that makes fun of the prequels and, you know... like.
Yeah, like, I remember... because you and I actually saw this movie together.
Yeah, we did.
Which is rare for us these days. But you at the end of it, you said it's rare to see a movie that makes every single correct creative decision.
Totally, and that's what it feels like. Is that everything about it is so enjoyable. You could watch this movie on mute and fall in love with it. You could watch.
The animation is fucking beautiful.
Yeah, you could watch this movie without visual and just listen to it, and you'd probably have a good time. Do you want to describe the animation in case people haven't seen them? Do you know much about it?
It's like it's like a combination of like 3D animation and like rotoscoping.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
So it's made to look like old school comic books. So instead of shading, things are dotted. Like they're called. I can't remember what they're called, but they've got a name. And it's the frame rate is lower. It's like what the Peanuts movie did.
It's animated on twos.
So the frame rate,
if you're for animation people out there,
it makes it look a bit more like it's stop motion as opposed to CGI.
It's a bit jerky so like things like anime and stop motion, even though it's like it's 20, 25, 24 frames per second, there'll only be movement every second frame.
Yeah. There you go.
And so, but there's kind of, because I saw it was like one of those that breaks down a scene from thing, is that there's it was the scene of when we meet Spider-Gwen and she's playing the drums, like it's like I'm in a band,
Yeah.
and the camera movement is animated on ones and Gwen's animated on twos.
Yeah.
So it's like, so a frame will be like the camera moves to the right, and then next frame Gwen moves slightly, and then next frame the camera moves, then Gwen, and it makes like it feel really. But yeah, that low frame rate animation, which a lot of people were kind of iffy on when the trailer was first released, that's actually just out of necessity for budget and timing reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it looks great. I think it looks awesome.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, so Lord and Miller wanted the film to feel like you walked inside a comic book, and were excited about telling the story in a way that live action films couldn't. So you do get, like, you see thought bubbles and panels and stuff pop up on screen in a very fun and organic way, as opposed to films that have maybe tried to do something similar in the past and haven't quite utilized it fully. It took around a year for 2 animators to create 10 seconds of footage that reflected the producer's vision. The animation work developed from there to 60 animators during production, where it became clear that this would not be enough to complete the film on time. So the crew was expanded further. The number had reached 142 animators by August 2018, and at one point to 177 animators, which is the largest animation crew that Sony Pictures Imageworks has ever used for a film.
And it worked. I mean, they won an Oscar for it.
Exactly. And I'm so glad they won the Oscar over Incredibles 2.
Yeah.
You know, because
Incredibles 2 was incredibly disappointing.
I wouldn't say it was incredibly disappointing.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I actually thought it was actually really great, just not quite as good as the first one.
Yeah.
But Pixar's always such a shoo-in for Best Animated, and this was the Oscar I cared about most last year. And I'm so glad.
because it tends to, the animation one is famous for just voting for the one you've heard of.
Yeah. What are your favorite things about this movie? Kind of free fall conversation.
Oh, okay. Animation style, obviously. Seeing different iterations of Spider-Man, especially Spider-Ham, voiced by John Mulaney. That's
So funny.
such perfect casting. I love John Mulaney, and that is probably the hardest I've ever laughed in my life.
I remember this in the cinema.
It was there's a bit when, so it's every character when they're introduced is like, all right, let's do this, and then it slaps a comic of theirs down that goes through like the same beats of what happened to them, and then when we meet Spider Noir, Penny Parker and Spider Ham at the same time, it does theirs all concurrently, and so they're all like, I was bitten by a radioactive spider, and then Spider Ham's just like, radioactive pig,
because he was a spider. He was a spider who was bitten by a radioactive pig. He was a spider that got bitten by a pig, yeah. And then so it goes, Spider Noir talks about like how I can't get through it. He talks about how he's like, sometimes I'll light a match and let it burn to the tips of my fingers just to feel anything. Yeah.
And then it cuts to Spider Ham, and he's like, I frolic and I dance and I do this with my pants. And he like pulls his pants over his head, and it was the fucking funniest thing I've ever seen. And I was like, I couldn't contain the. It was like I had a symbiote living inside of me, but that symbiote was laughter. Aww. And it just had to come out, and it was like, oh my god, I didn't hear the next 5 minutes of the movie because I was just,
you were deaf,
doubled over in like tears at that, and it was like, oh my god, I couldn't believe that wasn't what everyone was talking about in the movie. The
other line I really like from Spider-Ham is, I just washed my hands, that's why they're wet. It's such that's no how many reason. Times that happened to you, yeah, my favourite joke, I texted you about this when we watched it. I think I've messaged you because I've seen this movie twice in the last month.
I've seen it a few times.
And I think I've messaged you both times. But right at the end of the film, they're having this big battle with female Doc Ock and Wilson Fisk Kingpin, while like the Hadron Collider thing is like opened up all the universes, and everything is exploding and going crazy, and it's wild. And Doc Ock is like moving towards the characters. There's Gwen, OG Spider-Man, and Miles Morales Spider-Man. And she's moving towards them, and she's like doing her. She's like, "Yeah, you're gonna kill you." She's like about to deliver her. She's delivering her evil villain monologue at the height of her power, and then just before she gets to them, like because the alternate dimensions are making bits of alternate New York fly everywhere, a bus just crashes into her, like, and then it cuts to. I apologize for the like inherent problems with describing a joke, but it bashes into her, and it cuts to the 3-shot of Miles, Peter, and Gwen, and Peter puts his hand over his mouth in shock, and then in the same movement puts a hand on Miles' shoulder, and it's so fucking profoundly funny to see that reaction. Like, it's not enough for him to just put his hand over his mouth. The fact that he puts his hand on Miles' shoulder. There was a big earthquake in Christchurch a number of years ago. You've probably heard about it. And there are a lot of aftershocks.
I have heard about that.
There were a lot of aftershocks after, and I remember during one aftershock, I was at some place, and there was a guy talking to me, and when the aftershock hit, he put his hand on my shoulder as kind of like a protection, comfort kind of moment, right? And when I see Peter do that to Miles, what he's communicating is, oh my God, that was horrific. Miles, are you okay? But it's in like one swift movement, and it's so funny, man.
Also, to see that kind of direction and animation is really funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's something that a character might instinctively, if an actor's like fully in character, they might do that. But to have the foresight to put that in animation, it makes it even funnier.
It is such. Go and watch that scene if you don't know what I'm talking about. It's just, and all of what I've said happens within 3 seconds. She gets hit, and then it's like, and he puts his hand on his shoulder, and it's just the it's almost, I think part of it as well is it's kind of cute. Their like friendship is so wholesome.
Yeah, it's that looking out for a friend thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like we said, there's just so much to love about this film. It's hilarious as well, and and it does so many things right. And the cast is amazing. I love Brian Tyree Henry, who's like one of the best actors working today.
He plays.
He just pops up in everything,
dad.
And he's incredible. He's his dad, and then also Mahershala Ali, again one of the best actors working today, is plays Uncle Aaron.
Jake Johnson, one of the best actors working today, plays Peter B. Parker.
Yeah, one of the worst actors.
Do you not like Jake Johnson?
Yeah, I like Jake Johnson. He was one that I wasn't 100% convinced on with the trailers, and then I was like, in the film, I'm still not like, because Jake Johnson has such a distinctive voice, and I'm quite a fan of New Girl, so it's like hard to separate it from Nick. But then like his character kind of is just supposed to be Nick from New Girl. But yeah, if you are ready to move on, there's one thing that I want to say that I like about this film, which will segue into another discussion topic, which encompasses everything we've talked about.
I've got one more thing I wanted to say before we move on.
Okay, it might be the same thing.
No, it's an opinion thing.
Okay.
It's one of those shitty opinion things. I feel like I have to justify why Into the Spider-Verse doesn't quite dethrone Spider-Man 2 for me.
Okay.
Because Spider-Man 2, after rewatching them, I'm like, yep, Spider-Man 2 is still my favorite one. And I think it's because if Into the Spider-Verse has a weakness, I'd say it'd be its, not necessarily its story, but its plotting. Because you think about this, when people talk about this, what they like about this movie, they say, it's so funny, it looks amazing, the characters are awesome. Very rarely does someone go like, and the story is so good. The story's fine, the story serves a purpose, and it's pretty interesting and cool. But to me, I think there's a lot of coincidences in this film. Like Miles stumbles into Spider-Man and Green Goblin's fight. His uncle happens to be the Prowler. He happens to have a Spider-Man comic, which explains the powers to him. It's there's a lot of convenience, which is very comic booky. So good on it. But I think the worst moment, or at least the less, I should not want to use any negative words. So I'll say like the less developed moment for me is how the other Spider people, they're like, Miles, we've got to do this without you because you're just not good at controlling your powers, and then they leave, and he gets so upset that he's just able to control everything, and it doesn't really feel like he learns or goes through anything to that. He doesn't have a level up moment. He doesn't.
Oh, I think he does.
What do you think it is?
That whole scene, and then the What's Up Danger, which is the fucking amazing scene.
But the What's Up Danger stuff happens after he's.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so I'm saying, but like his dad talks to him, and he's realizing that like you need to get over the fact that you're the only reason that hundreds of millions of people might die right now is because you're too scared. And so
that's pretty good, actually.
I need to get over that. Like that's such a dumb reason to let millions of people die.
No, cool.
And there's a great moment as well. So the What's Up Danger thing, when he's it was in the first trailer when he's on the it takes like the leap of faith, and they talk about that's all it is, a leap of faith. He's on the building and he jumps off, and some shards of glass come off the building.
Yeah.
And it's established earlier in the film that it's when he's nervous or scared, he like can't control his power. So he's attached to the light and he can't let go of it until he calms down.
Mm-hmm.
And so because the glass comes off, he was still terrified to take that jump. He was still sticking to the glass, but he took that leap of faith anyway.
All right, now you've convinced me. Good on you. I just needed someone to like kind of articulate it. And like regardless, I felt like I needed to bring that up just because people be like, why did you rank Spider-Man 2 above Into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, I mean, and also, yeah, I mean, I think that's not necessary because there was a few reviews that were like, people that are saying Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the best one, need to remember Spider-Man 2. And it's like, I've always just seen Spider-Man 1 and 2 as like a package deal of like really, really good movies, but I don't think I've ever seen... We talked about this in the sequel episode that like when I first saw Spider-Man 2, I was just, oh yeah, that's a good sequel.
Right. And like, look, I'm so in love with this movie that I don't want to dwell on its shortcomings, really.
Well, let's talk about something that's good, if I may.
Please.
Move on. So this film has a really good like sort of single from it of Sunflower by Sway Lee and Post Malone.
Mm-hmm.
This is just 6 out of 8 of these films have like singles, like a music, a song that's released in conjunction with it. So I want to talk about those and rank them if we can.
Venom by Eminem is the best one.
So you've got Spider-Man 1, Raimi had Hero by Chad Kroeger and Josie Scott, which is not My Hero by Foo Fighters, and it's also not by Nickelback. A little throwback there. Spider-Man 2 had Vindicated by Dashboard
we have to sing them
Confessional.
as we go through them. Sorry. So,
Okay.
Hero.
So Hero, off you go.
I feel that a hero can save us. I'm not gonna stand here and wait.
Cool. And then Spider-Man 2 had Vindicated by Dashboard Confessional.
Vindicated! I am selfish! I am wrong! I am right! I swear I'm right! Swear I knew it all along! And I am... What's the word? What's
But that I am cleaning up so well. Singing me now the things you swear you saw yourself.
Oh, it's so deliciously angsty.
I know.
I love that song.
It would suit the third one better, almost.
Yeah.
And then the third one has like the like the complete opposite of how well it fits. From Vindicated has Signal Fire by Snow Patrol.
How does that one go?
Which has a beautiful music video. It's like a kid's play of the first 2 Spider-Man movies.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. How does that song go?
There you are, standing right in front of me.
I don't think I remember it.
You are my signal fire. Anyway, and then Amazing Spider-Man doesn't have one. Amazing Spider-Man 2 has one called "It's On Again" by Alicia Keys and Kendrick Lamar. I do not know this song at all.
I don't know.
But I was like, oh hey, that has one because I
It
was
also
like,
has Gone. Can't forget that.
Yeah. And then Homecoming doesn't have one. It like uses Blitzkrieg Bop like a theme song, but it's not like
Blitzkrieg Bop.
And then we had Venom has Venom by Eminem.
That goes, knock, knock, let the devil in. I'm Eminem. Hey, I'm Eminem. I talk like this. I sing like this. I have a homophobic past that I pretend wasn't serious, but it actually was, and I'm kind of outdated. Venom, 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 Venom. Venom. Yep.
And then Into the Spider-Verse has Sunflower by Sway Lee and Post Malone.
How does that go? I don't think I know it.
Needless to say, I keep on
it's that.
you was at my
Specific
place,
to the
baby,
movie.
you're a wreck. Ooh.
I didn't know that was for the film. That's amazing.
It is. You'll be left in the dust unless it's stuck by you. Yeah.
I don't want to rank these because they each feel indicative of the time the movie came out in. So, like,
then, like, you know, we can rank them on, like, how well do they suit the movie? Or, like, and when the movie came out.
I don't think I can comfortably say Vindicated is the best song of that, but it's the one I enjoy listening to the most.
Probably same. But I think, like, there's a part of me that's like, oh, lame that, like, Sunflower's the, like... Because I love the like rock ones of the Raimi times, but it suits the movie so well. It's like believable as a song that Miles would be into, and it's like it has just a great song as well. But yeah, I think they all really suit the songs, and it's very interesting to me as well that like Chad Kroger featuring Josie Scott of Saliva and Dashboard Confessional and Chase and I keep going to say Chasing Cars, Snow Patrol all feel like they came out in completely different time periods.
Yeah.
Like, and I guess it's just because that was kind of that 7 years was puberty for me, and so not that my puberty was like 7 years long. I mean, I guess it is, isn't it? Puberty is like ages technically, but anyway, that's when you change the most as a person, really, in your entire life. And so even though it was like 2 years difference and then 3 years difference, it feels like a lifetime between each of them.
Totally. Yeah. Agreed.
Because I remember the first Spider-Man coming out at a time when, like, my parents had to Google if it was, like, okay for me to see. And then I think I just didn't happen to get to the second one at a point. And then by the time I got to the third one, I was, like, my own person and could just go to the movies.
Nice. Hey, well, while we're on the theme of ranking things, I thought we could play a new game here, Richard. Yeah. This game's called Who's the Best Who? Okay. So I've compiled every character in the 8 Spider-Man movies who's been played by more than one actor, and we're going to decide who is the best actor who played that character. All right, so original recipe Peter Parker, so I haven't included Nicolas Cage
or Chris Pine.
I actually have.
Okay.
Just normal Peter Parker, like unthemed Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Right? We got Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland, Jake Johnson, or Chris Pine. Who's the best one?
Are we talking just Peter Parker, not Spider-Man?
We can combine it into one conversation, but you can pick multiple ones.
Have you got one?
I would say Tom Holland is the best Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And Andrew Garfield is the best Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Tobey Maguire does a really good job of post-high school Peter Parker.
Yeah.
But like he's just so not believable as being in high school. I also do really like Chris Pine. I think Chris Pine works for the like Chris Pine and Jake Johnson being alternate versions of like when something going wrong, and Chris Pine being like the perfect specimen of a human being that he is.
Yeah, sure.
And being that version of Spider-Man, because we never really see him as Peter Parker.
Yeah. I like Jake Johnson's character, but he's not Peter Parker as I know him to be. Yeah. All right, Mary Jane Watson or MJ has been played by Kirsten Dunst, Zendaya, and Zoe Kravitz. Shailene Woodley gets an honourable mention, I guess.
She's my favourite.
I guess Kirsten Dunst would be my favourite.
We haven't really gotten to like Zendaya yet. But I mean, we'll see, I guess, in Far From Home. But yeah, I mean,
it'd be such an insult to Kirsten Dunst for her to not be the best MJ.
Yeah, Kirsten Dunst.
She's the only one who's had like an actual go at it. Basically.
Yeah, and she's also like that. That like scene in the rain with the upside down kiss was like such a sexual awakening.
Yeah, and Zoe Kravitz plays her in Into the Spider-Verse, by the way, just in case.
I do love the Spider-Verse MJ as well.
Yeah. Harry Osborn has been played by James Franco and Dane DeHaan. Dean DeHaan. Who's the best one of those two?
I was actually thinking about this. I really like Dean DeHaan's Harry, but it's just like ruined in the same movie that it's introduced.
Yeah. I'd say. I'd give it a draw because they each fit each of their series.
Yeah. Like and they're also they're kind of different interpretations of it. Like Raimi's one, or Franco's one, is like a douchey frat boy who's always had everything, whereas like Dean is like more of a preppy kind of statesman that's always had everything.
All right, Norman Osborn / Green Goblin has been played by Willem Dafoe, Chris Cooper in The Amazing Spider-Man, and Jorma Taccone. Did you know he played him into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this goes to Dafoe, right?
But yeah, Jorma is basically only does like yelling sounds in this one.
Right.
But yeah.
Dr. Octavia / Dr. Octopus has been played by Alfred Molina or Catherine Hahn.
It's Molina, yeah.
But, okay, yes. Melina's great, like classic Doc Ock, but I love the the design of Catherine Hahn's Dr. Octavius.
Yeah, she's
Olivia
great, but it's
Octavius.
like Alfred Molina's like one of the best comic book villains.
For sure.
And his performance.
I wanted to mention just like I love that in Into the Spider-Verse, the tentacles are made out of like this puffy, squishy
they're like a silicon material.
Yeah, like a silicon thing. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. And I love just her character design and she doesn't look like a generic
with her hair
character.
up, and so she looks like an octopus.
Yeah, she looks like that's a good point. I never even clicked with that, but it's more just like she's such a specific looking person. You know what I mean? So it's not just like generic
and I do love
female
Catherine Hahn
character.
as well. She's always great.
Yeah, same. Eddie Brock or Venom has been played by Topher Grace or Tom Hardy. Now this one of these needs to win, but which one will it be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Tom Hardy.
Yeah. Gwen Stacy has been played by Bryce Dallas Howard, Emma Stone, and Haley Steinfeld.
Haley Steinfeld.
Yeah, agreed.
I love the Spider-Gwen in that. She's like, she's so beautiful as well in that.
Yeah.
Which is fine to say because she's animated. I'm not objectifying her. She's not real.
Captain George Stacy has been played by James Cromwell and Dennis Leary. Dennis Leary does way more as the character.
Yeah. Well, so Dennis Leary looks a lot like him in the comics.
Aaron Davis / Prowler has been played by Donald Glover and Mahershala Ali, which to me is mind-blowing. I don't know, just that those two, they're both very, like, in-demand actors playing very different interpretations of the character.
Yeah, I actually don't really like Donald Glover's one. I'd love to see him fleshed out more, but...
it's easily Mahershala just because, again, he has more. He's done more as the character.
Yeah, and you get to see the mentor side of him as well, which is cool.
Yeah, this is one that I didn't know until I looked up found the table of actors and characters. J. Jonah Jameson has been played by J.K. Simmons and Stan Lee.
In the post-credit scene of Amazing the Into the Spider-Verse, which is cool that his dream all his life apparently was to play J. Jonah Jameson, and then he finally got it. It was the second film released after his death, which is annoying that Venom ruined that because his first posthumous cameo is in Venom, but then he has this really poignant one in Into the Spider-Verse, which just like came out just a little bit after. But yeah, like right at the end, he has like one quick line in the post-credit scene with Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah. So it's a very, very cute, very awesome. However, it definitely goes to J.K. Simmons. So
yeah, because it's, again, one of the best comic book performances of all time.
Flash Thompson has been played by Joe Manganiello. Chris Zilka apparently plays him in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I didn't recognize him.
What do you mean apparently? Yeah, he is in them.
Oh, is he? I didn't recognize.
Yeah,
him.
no.
Yeah.
He's quite a big part of it. Because in the first one, and he, but yeah, cause I picked him up because I recognize him from The Leftovers.
Right, and he was also played by Tony Revolori in Homecoming. What's the best one here?
I actually,
I don't have a favorite because I don't think any of them are particularly noteworthy. Not because they're all
I don't know.
particularly good.
I do quite like Tony Revolori's it's not necessarily his interpretation, but that interpretation of like a bully who's still a nerd himself. But Chris Zilka's one's quite good because he's probably the most fleshed out one in terms of even though you didn't even pick up on him, but that he's because he has this moment where he like tries to have a moment with Peter when Uncle Ben dies, being like, look, I
like that bit.
Yeah, he's like just look, not today, Flash. I just lay off me, and he's like trying to apologize or like make peace with him in some way.
All right, I'm giving it to Chris Zilka, best Flash Thompson. Okay, Kurt Connors / The Lizard. We've got Dylan Baker or Rhys Ifans. I think Dylan Baker's better.
Yeah, Dylan Baker's cool. I like because he's in all three of them, isn't he? Or like
he's in the 3 Raimi movies.
Yeah.
He never becomes Lizard, but Rhys Ifans just it's such a weird role.
Yeah,
Kurt Connors in Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Mac Gargan / The Scorpion has been played by Michael Mando in Homecoming and Joaquin Cosio in Into the Spider-Verse.
I like that he actually doesn't speak English in Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. Michael Mando is a real good casting.
Yeah, he's cool. I like him.
Like he's that perfect like TV actor who's famous if you watch the show, but if you don't watch Better Call Saul, you probably
Well,
won't.
his biggest role that kind of brought him to fame is he's the villain in Far Cry 3. He did the motion capture for it.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh,
that was
yes,
how he
yes,
got
that's right, yeah.
that's how he got Better Call Saul.
Nice. Uncle Ben, Cliff Robertson, or Martin Sheen? I think Martin Sheen. I'm going to give it to Martin Sheen.
Really?
As much as I don't like that movie or Uncle Ben in that movie, it just feels, I don't know, his Martin Sheen being a better actor than Cliff Robertson.
Yeah, but we didn't talk about it, but why does Martin Sheen jump for this gun? It's so stupid. So someone's running towards you, he trips over, a gun falls out, and Martin Sheen's like, "Oh, I'll try and stop him." And it's like, just what are you doing? And then that gets him shot, and it's like.
So do you go for Cliff Robertson then?
He just filmed this stupid decision. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, Cliff Robertson's just so iconic, but Martin Sheen it kind of has a Cliff Robertson all the way.
All right. And Aunt May, probably, this to me is the hardest one, Aunt May. We've had Rosemary Harris, Sally Field, Marissa Tomei, and Lily Tomlin have all played. Those are all
Lily
great
Tomlin's
actresses.
Great, actually. I think Sally Field's the worst, 100%.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to go Lily Tomlin.
I got to go Rosemary Harris.
I'm going to go Lily Tomlin.
I got to go Rosemary Harris just for I Believe There's a Hero in All of Us. It's such
she's
a
great, and she is also the closest to the comics. But then I love that Aunt May in the Homecoming one, how it's she would probably just be this young, she's not even that, she's 50. But it's just Marissa Tomei, so she's real hot.
All right, and the final, who's the best who, or should I say, what's the best what? What's the best with great power comes great responsibility line?
Nice.
So
I was just about to say, we even come back to that. We need to...
in the original film, the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, it's just straight up, with great power comes great responsibility. In the Amazing Spider-Man, it is the wonderfully ham-fisted piece of dialogue that is, your father had a philosophy, a principle, really. He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility. And then in Captain America Civil War, so not in Homecoming, but sort of the version of it, Peter Parker says, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
Yeah. Well, also, I would like to throw into the ring as well. Spider-Man Homecomings. If you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve it.
Oh, very good. And that's who I award the best one.
And that's I was like, is that actually the best one? I do really like that one.
The original is just so iconic, but I do like when you can do the things I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen. They happen because of you. I think that, again, we're talking about the styles of each universe. That is a fantastic way to make, with great power comes great responsibility, a realistic line of dialogue that MCU Peter Parker would say.
Yeah. It's MCU Peter Parker could have been told with great power comes great responsibility, and that's his way of understanding that. Yeah, that's a what is for 15-year-old kid retelling that, But obviously, with great power comes great responsibility is so iconic. But I do love the way that if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve it. Then you shouldn't have it, or whatever the line is. Fits into the MCU. It's great.
Yeah. All right, so let's just race through titles. So we talked about this on the last time we did Spider-Man. Alternate titles for Spider-Man 2 included The Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man No More, and Spider-Man 2 Lives.
Two Lives.
Right? Two Lives.
Spider-Man 2 Lives, because it's about him living 2 lives.
And we also talked about how Rise of Electro is a pretty weird. You could have picked 100 things. It's
not about the Rise of Electro.
Yeah, you could have picked 100 things from Amazing Spider-Man 2 to give it its subtitle, and Rise of Electro is somehow the one that won. Homecoming's fine. Venom's fine. Into the Spider-Verse, I think I'm really looking forward to seeing what the sequels are going to be titled. There was a leak, or it could have been, it probably was fake, but I remember people being like, oh, the name for the Into the Spider-Verse sequel has leaked, and it was called Beginning of Spider-Geddon or something like that.
Edge of Spider-Geddon.
Edge of Spider-Geddon.
Yeah, which is a comic thing. Because there was
Okay.
Spider-Verse was the first big crossover between all the different canons, and then they did Spider-Geddon as well.
I really like. So my advice to the Into the Spider-Verse producers is to make all the titles be combined, like making a portmanteau of Spider-Man in another word.
Yeah.
I think that's the key.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, they've got two already, like so it'd be like Into the Spider-Verse, Edge of Spider-Geddon, and then what's another like Edge or Into kind of word?
Dawn.
Yeah, Dawn
Rise.
of the Spider-Apocalypse.
Yeah, Spider-Apocalypse is great. All right, Richard. Let's ask everyone if they want to be on our podcast. It's 2019.
Hey, do you want to be on our podcast?
Okay, so this is a segment where we tweet someone who is involved in the franchise and see if they want to be on the podcast. This week, we are tweeting at O'Keefe Artist on Twitter. His name's
nice.
Patrick O'Keefe. He is the art director for Into the Spider-Verse. I have actually messaged him on Instagram before he didn't reply, so I thought Twitter might be a better way to... I think he might be following us on Instagram. I remember there being significant seeing his name or something like that. So I'm tweeting him and saying, hey, at O'Keefe Artist, we run a movie-based podcast out of New Zealand and would love to have you over Skype talking about your work on Into the Spider-Verse. Would you be keen? Tweeting that now. It is tweeted. Please get in contact, Patrick O'Keefe. We'd love to talk to you. And finally, Richard, let's continue the franchise.
Ooh.
This is where we pitch some sequels, but before we do that, there have already been a plethora of cancelled and upcoming sequels that I'll quickly race through now. Raimi's Spider-Man 4, 5, and 6 were all at various stages of development before the franchise was rebooted, with 4 having obviously the most groundwork laid before it was cancelled. Spider-Man 4 would have included Vulture as the main villain, played by John Malkovich, with Anne Hathaway playing Black Cat, and Bruce Campbell appearing as Mysterio for a quick cameo at the start of a montage, a quick cameo at the start of the movie during a montage of Spider-Man fighting B-list villains such as Mysterio, the Shocker, the Prowler, and Rhino, all of whom would later appear in Spider-Man films.
Yeah, and also, like, this got like 2 weeks away from shooting, didn't it?
Maybe, probably.
I'm pretty sure it got very close to happening.
It says that I read that there were 4 iterations of the script before, and Raimi reportedly was like, I hate all of these.
Yeah, there's an interview with Tobey Maguire from, and he's like, yeah, we're shooting in like a month.
Wow, there you go. Early versions for what eventually became Venom were planned for both the Raimi and Amazing Spider-Man continuities, which is kind of the coolest thing about Venom as a film, right, is that it survived production hell through 2 different continuity dissolves and 1 reboot it wasn't included in.
Yeah, it was one of those movies that when it was announced, I was like, this is never happening.
Speaking of the Amazing Spider-Man, this series has some very infamous and widely publicized cancelled sequels, including a 3rd and 4th film, which were rumored to include Rhino, Black Cat, and even the return of Gwen Stacy as Spider-Gwen. The Amazing
Gwen
Spider-Man...
Stacy's dad was going to come back as well.
Yep. The Amazing Spider-Man also had some spin-offs in the works as it scrambled to build a cinematic universe out of 1 intellectual property. These spin-offs included the aforementioned Venom film, a Sinister Six film, an unspecified female-driven film, a sequel to the Venom film called Venom Carnage, and there are also rumors of a Black Cat film and, of course, the Aunt May origin story where she was a spy or something.
Yeah.
There are a few continuations that are already actually happening and currently in progress. Most notably would be Spider-Man Far From Home, the Homecoming sequel due out in a month or so. Is it fair to call it a Homecoming sequel, though? I think it's probably more a Endgame sequel, but see how it goes. And I would also expect, there'll be a 3rd MCU Spider-Man film following.
Yeah, presumably.
Following Far From Home. Venom 2 is currently scheduled for a 2020 release, and other films planned for Sony's universe of Marvel characters include Morbius the Living Vampire starring Jared Leto,
Which is filmed.
Kraven the Hunter, and also a Silver Sable Black Cat movie called Silver and Black. We talked about all
That's
them.
cancelled, I'm pretty sure.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. We talked about all of these when we did our What's Up with Sony Spider-Man movies podcast last year. You would be a fool to think the future sequels stop there, though, Richard, because Into the Spider-Verse sequel is in early stages of planning, as we said before, as well as a Spider-Gwen-led female team-up spin-off, which may also see Gwen team up with Silk and the OG Spider-Woman. And John Mulaney has also said he'd love to do a Spider-Ham solo film, which focuses on a Watergate-style conspiracy. Hell yeah, dude. And if you don't want to wait, there is a short Looney Tunes style special feature which focuses on Spider-Ham, which we've seen that, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And
That's great.
Yeah, it's really funny.
It's what he was doing immediately before getting sucked into the
Right.
dimension.
Yeah. And I feel like we've already kind of mentioned this, but the PlayStation 4 game, just that it's another mainstream Spider-Man continuity.
And it's fucking amazing.
It's really good. Okay, my continuing franchise. I want to build a cinematic universe out of the Spider-Verse canon. Because I remember people were always like, oh, how are they going to make a cinematic universe out of just Spider-Man when Amazing Spider-Man was trying to do that? I've never thought that was a particularly bad idea. I think there are enough Spider-Man characters to build a cinematic universe out of them. I just didn't want it to be in that continuity. But I love the Spider-Verse continuity and would love to see that canon. So if you imagine Into the Spider-Verse is the universe's equivalent of the Avengers or the team-up movie, because we haven't really seen a cinematic universe start with the team-up movie, which I think is an interesting strategy.
Yeah.
And potentially quite effective, because you can just cancel it if it's bad and no one's going to be like, they were trying to set up a cinematic universe. So I reckon, we start with that and then we split off so we get individual movies for each of the Spider people before teaming up for a Spider-Verse sequel with more characters and similar, basically do the same thing the MCU do, where it's an Avengers movie and then individual movies. So you can do a Spider-Man noir movie, a Spider-Ham movie, a Penny Parker movie, a Gwen Stacy movie. Then you can introduce other Spider people.
Yeah. That's pretty similar to what I had. I've got two kind of options. One is like just some... I'd love to see an Into the Spider-Verse sequel. That's like priority number one for me. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of ones you can include in it because they've obviously teased 2099, which is to be played by Oscar Isaac if he returns.
Yes, that was the other one I was going to...
because he plays him in the sequel. And he also has developed some kind of technology which allows you to jump from dimension to dimension. And then... you've got like the Scarlet Spider, the original Spider-Woman. There's so many different Spider-Men in the comics, and the Spider-Monkey, which would be another fun one to bring in. Get Nick Kroll to voice him.
Okay.
And then also my other thing would be I would love a Spider-Man game that's basically just Into the Spider-Verse. Like the animation style would work great in a video game, but like just the Spider-Man PS4 game, bring in the plot of Into the Spider-Verse because it already has Miles Morales in it. So, I'd love to see, because you get the different suits and stuff like that, but to actually have it woven into the plot that, like, you're crossing dimensions and stuff would be really cool. Yeah,
and you play as different characters and have different suits. That'd be cool.
Yeah, like a GTA 5 kind of thing where you can just, like, swap between the characters and they're all off doing their own things.
I love the Spider-Gwen suit, and I'd love to play. But it'd be weird if you were playing that and still had Peter Parker's voice coming through.
Yeah. So that's kind of my ones. It's just
nice.
I just love Spider-Man, and I just want to see as much Spider-Man as possible.
Well, Richard, I love Spider-Man too, but do you know what I love more than Spider-Man?
Do you know I love Spider-Man too, but do you know I love more? Into the Spider-Verse.
Well, do you know what I love more than all of those things?
What?
Our friendship.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. Franchise roulette. So
my ranking goes Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man, Our Friendship, The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Franchise roulette. So franchise roulette is our final segment where we are going to pull up our list of 1 million franchises and draw a random number from a random number generator, and that is going to tell us what franchise we're going to be covering over the next fortnight. Richard, give us a number, bro.
80.
80? Well, can you look for 80, please, Richard?
I can.
And before we reveal what it is, I do just want to quickly say, hey, everybody, go like Cult Popture on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on wherever you follow your podcasts, and find us on Twitter and Instagram and all the different places. And also go join the Little Empire Podcast Pals group on Facebook as well, and post a funny meme.
All right. Do you want me to try and get you to guess the franchise?
Absolutely.
So it is a franchise. It's a trilogy, I believe. I'll just quickly double check that But it'll be the second franchise. It's written by the same person who wrote one of our favorite franchises.
Is it written by the guy who wrote Scream?
It is.
I don't think I know what it is. What's the guy's name?
Kevin Williamson.
No,
he wrote two big similar movies in the 90s. One was Scream.
This is a horror?
Yeah.
A horror trilogy.
Yeah. That involves knowing what someone did last summer.
Is it I Know What You Did Last Summer?
It is.
That's a great franchise to get.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about titles.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same titling scheme as Bring It On and Cinderella Story.
Yeah.
Because it's I know what you did. I still know what you did, and I'll always know what you did.
All right. Well, you've done the plug, so we can just end the podcast here.
Well, cool, Richard.
Yeah.
So it is just 3?
Yep.
I would have thought there were way more.
No, just this 3.
Cool. Okay, we'll tune in next fortnight for that, and tune in next week for our conversation about what's the best prequel, Richard.
Ooh, a cheeky preaky.
A cheeky
A cheeky preaky
of-
scushy. Alrighty. That's all from me. Until next time, keep swinging those
with
webs.
great podcasts.
And happy 3 years.
Great. Happy 3 years, everybody. Thank you
Bye.
for listening. If you've been listening from the start, 4.
Four.
Go outside.